So Shaykh Yasir, before I get into the topic today, which is going to be about the ego, I heard you just came back from Ecuador.
Yes.
What was that like?
Ecuador was a profoundly humbling experience. It has the most active volcanoes of any country.
Okay.
And so you're constantly humbled by the possibility of being swarmed and consumed by ash and otherwise.
Nothing erupted when you were there.
Actually, subhanAllah, I came out of where we were staying one day, and the person who was with us said to me, "You see all this ash in the car?" I said, "Yeah." He's like, "That's a volcano eruption."
Ajib.
So there was a volcano that erupted somewhere 65 kilometers away, and overnight the ash had settled in the capital from 65 miles away, 65 kilometers. Yeah, so I mean, but driving through the mountains, so it's a part of the, there's obviously Ecuador is like comprised of the Amazon,
okay,
and then the Andes Mountains, and then the shore, or what is like farm and the lower land. And each one of them is an ayah min ayatillah.
Wow.
And I was constantly forced to remember Allah.
Akbar.
Just because at times you are very intimidated and afraid, you feel like you're about to fall off, you're so high, you're so low. So
it's amazing as human beings we think we know so much.
Yeah.
And then we haven't even traveled Allah's land. And then we see what Allah creates. We realize, I know nothing. I am nothing.
So I kept on telling my wife, I was like, we live in Boston, and so Boston becomes the world.
Right.
Then you go to Ecuador, and then Boston is like a speck.
Yeah.
It's not even like identifiable anymore. Because you're in this space, and suddenly you are so at a loss. You're not in control of, we're never in control, but you really feel that you are so fragile. Your existence is so possible, in that moment. I remember we were taking the teleférico, which is like the telefreak, or different countries, different languages, and going to the top of Mount Pichincha, which is one of the active volcanoes that directly overlooks Quito, the capital.
Wow.
And my heart sank.
Wow.
And suddenly when we were at 6,000 feet, now we're like 16,000 feet.
Wow.
And you're seeing the world, and you just realize I've spent so much time thinking about very particular things, not realizing that I'm just so insignificant. And subhanAllah, this is so perfect. Something Sheikh Mukhtar told me when I was sitting with him in Turkey once in Fatih. And, we were talking about something. It was a little personal, so I'll keep it. I won't divulge too much. But he said a line to me. He said, "Listen, the grave is full of people who thought they were indispensable.
Wow.
The graveyard is full of people who thought they were important. All you need to know is that you're not important. If you understand that, then your life will be a lot more conceivable and possible and realizable." May Allah bless Shaykh Mukhtar.
Which actually brings us to our topic. You're talking about being important, and also these volcanoes erupting. So I want to talk to you about the concept of the ego. So you're here at the Pearls in the Qur'an.
Yeah.
You just finished a lecture, and the title was interesting. Title: Ego is the enemy.
Mm-hmm.
Why is ego the enemy?
Because the ego is what made Iblis ultimately thrust himself into a space of la'na, of being cursed, of being in a lifelong self-inflicted wound of a prison, where he initially thought to himself that, I'm special, I'm unique, and that was grounded in the nafs. Now the ulama, they say that the ego is the nafs, unrestricted, untamed, undisciplined, undeveloped. And that's what his reality was. He just couldn't fathom the idea that somehow Adam is someone that he should prostrate to or give this deference to. And he said, and what's amazing, and what I just said was on the stage, was that he articulated, he said, "Khalaqtani min nar wa khalaqtahu min teen." Like, Ya Allah, okay, so this is a conversation
going on, right?
Hey Allah, you created me from fire, created from dirt.
Right.
طب يا بعيد النظر, as they say, you someone who does not see beyond yourself.
Right.
You're talking to Allah, who is the creator.
Right.
And you yourself, you are a possible existence.
Right.
How suddenly now do you find yourself so entitled, so confident, so certain that you reject what Allah is commanding you to do?
Right.
Right? And that's why ego is the enemy.
You know, it's so interesting. I'll tell you what happened recently. I was with my son Muhammad. May Allah make him of the great awliya. He's 11 years old. And I told him to do something, knowing full well what I was telling him to do. And he replied to me, telling me, no, I'm not going to do that, Baba, because X, Y, Z. And I looked at him. I was like, excuse me? You know, how dare you respond to me in this way? And so, you know, it's so interesting, like you're saying that, but aren't we taught, you know, especially in the workplace, to have a little bit of an ego so you can get somewhere, show yourself and get ahead?
You know, I think there is a distinction between the ego and the assertion of the ego and the question of confidence.
Okay.
I think those are two different realities in the most, call it, existential spiritual sense. Mm-hmm. They may look and feel at times the same, but they're not in their essence the same. Because if you, as I was mentioning, if you put Iblis, the Iblisi orientation, in front of the other orientation, which is the Muhammadan orientation, which was someone who, in the face of the divine command, negated himself. So the initial moment of revelation was where the Prophet ﷺ said, "Ma ana." And this is where he chose, he understood, and he was divinely inspired in that moment to realize that his point of ascension is going to start with the annihilation of the self. Right? And this is the concept of fana, but the idea of saying, "Ma ana," I am not. That's my haqiqah. My haqiqah is that I am faqir. I am aftaqiru ila Allah. I am in need. I am barely contingent. Right? So, with that disposition, when someone now comes and says, "Okay, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given me asbab.
Right.
He's given me a capacity. I am going to now utilize and assert." The question is, why? Why do you assert? If someone is asserting themselves to affirm themselves, then they have oriented themselves within a Iblisi orientation. However, if I assert myself to affirm Allah, that's a Muhammadan orientation.
That's a very important point that I think that we have to just take time to digest that. SubhanAllah. So you're saying if someone asserts themselves to affirm Allah and His Messenger,
then they are Muhammad in their orientation, because all the Prophet Muhammad wanted was that people see Allah.
Right.
He wanted them to look to Allah. Right. He did not want them to look at, Wama Muhammad. Wama Muhammad. See, this is a Quranic linguistic construction. Wama Muhammad. Yes, there's a continuation, I know. But the fact that Ma ana, Wama Muhammad, it's not about me. It's about Allah. I need everyone to look at Allah. So if I'm at work and I want to, now I'm going to utilize my skill sets, my knowledge, my ability, my savvy, my networking capacity, and I'm doing that because I really believe that people need to see Allah, right, in this space. I'm in the corporate world, I'm at school, I'm in a hospital, I'm in Ecuador, going back to Ecuador. My wife, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala be pleased with her, we were on top of Mount Pichincha. She raised her finger like this and she said, "Ya Allah, ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah." And ya mountain, witness for us that we remembered Allah on this mountain. Wallahi al-azim. And she shook me by her reminding me that the mountain will testify for us. Right? That the mountain will testify. How many Muslims go to Mount Pichincha in Ecuador? Right? There's a few thousand Muslims aslan, like as it stands in Ecuador.
This is the first time I'm hearing of Mount Pichincha. I hope I said it right. Pichincha.
But Chimborazo, or any of these other mountains, right? Any of these volcanic spaces. How many Muslims have been there? When you go there, you testify.
Right.
And on Yawm al-Qiyamah, Pichincha is resurrected.
Wow.
And it testifies for you.
Right.
So you're at PricewaterhouseCoopers.
Right.
Or you're at, Mount Sinai. Or you're wherever you are.
Right.
And that space testifies on your behalf. Then you can talk about confidence and the assertion of self, because you're thinking about Yawm al-Qiyamah and you're thinking about Allah, right? But it's not a matter of climbing the mountain to say, take my picture, like, this whole industry, for example, around climbing Everest.
Right.
At the end of the day, it's just a big industry for people to have that photo op so that they can put it on their mantle and say, look at me Look at me, I went through this. But if I go there and say, Ya Allah, like how small I am in your space. How unqualified am I to even speak on your behalf or to represent?
Right.
That's a very different essence.
So I mean, that requires one to recognize that they even have an ego, right? And then number two, do something about it.
Yeah.
So, how does one, arrive at the fact that, hey, I do have a problem. I do see myself even subtly. I mean, because it's not necessary to be a satanic expression of that ego. I don't think, most people are walking around the halls of pearls of the Qur'an looking at everyone saying, I'm better than this guy, I'm better than... Well, there maybe, I don't know, may Allah protect us. But it's usually more subtle, isn't it?
Absolutely. And then that's actually the entire crux of my talk was to talk about ego, but not in the context of arrogance.
Okay.
It was to talk about ego within the context of self-obsession. Because we all have an ego. This idea that none of us have egos, or I don't have an ego. I'm a very humble person.
Right.
Yeah, leave that up to Allah.
Right.
Okay, I don't need to assert myself and say, hey, listen, I don't have an ego. We all have egos. We're human beings. We have a nafs. We have a nafs amara bisu. That is the essence of the ego. Right? It lies there. And Shaykh Mukhtar has taught us countless times about the subu'i nafs and the bahimi nafs and the shaytani nafs. That is the essence. So it's there. But what happens is, when we define it simply as I'm not someone who looks down at someone, we are lacking in the definition, because ego is much more about just the obsession with the self. Bima'na, meaning my pain, my trauma, my history. You don't know what happened to me.
Right.
You know what, Ustaz Mu'tasim? You'll never know what I've been through. You'll never understand it. It's like, really, yes and no. You think you're that special. You're not. Let me save you the time, and let me save you the self-agony from telling you you're actually not that unique. That's a good thing. People say, why are you belittling me? Don't insult me. No, it's not about insult or belittle. I just want to let you know, لَسْتَ بِدَعًا مِنَ النَّاسِ. Like, you're not some,
But that hurts me to hear that.
No,
but really,
in this space, which is, if I come, listen, I deal with people all the time.
But I agree with everything you're saying.
And people are coming and saying, I went through this trauma 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And Shaykh, you'll never understand how bad it's been for me.
Right.
But then when I hear that from the person that comes after her,
of course,
or after him,
of course,
and after them, and everyone's coming with the same narrative.
Right.
What is that ultimately saying? Right. I'm special.
Right.
I'm unique. Right. No, if I realize I am actually not that special or unique, then I will come to terms with my essence, and then I'll come to a space of elevation and growth. But if you're 100% right, if I don't identify the subtlety of the existence of the ego, and all it is a recognition of ana, self-centeredness, person-centric, selfishness. It's how I feel, it's what I want, it's what I like, despite what's happening around me. How many homes are traumatized and in pain and in agony because of one family member that just can't get over themselves?
Right, of course.
A mother or a father who's sulking in their own story and their own narrative about what they've been through. That becomes a detriment of the children. It becomes a detriment of the whole clan, the uncles, the aunts, the cousins. Why? Because so-and-so can't get over the fact that they lost a loved one.
Right.
Or can't get over the fact that they were afflicted with an illness. Billions and billions have been afflicted with illnesses. Yeah. It's not to belittle the fact that what's happening to you is a trial. Right. But it is nowhere near the end of the world.
Absolutely.
And it's objectively not a big deal.
And I think we need to open ourselves up to this realization. Yes. Because I think in opening ourselves up to this realization is the only way we're actually going to heal ourselves with the help of others from that trauma that I can't believe or you don't know what I've gone through. Yeah. And so it requires that opening. So, what does one do? Okay, so now I've recognized I have this problem. What do I do?
Two things, in my opinion. Number one, the Prophet ﷺ tells us, "Man tawada'a lillahi hakadha, rafa'ahu Allahu hakadha." Those who humble themselves this way, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will lift them up this way. The pathway of liberation, freeing the self of itself, خلي بالك من نفسك, empty yourself of yourself. Sure. Or خذ بالك من نفسك, be mindful. All of that is a reality of humbling oneself to Allah, who is the haqiqah, who al-haq al-mubin, He is the manifest truth. And when we humble ourselves and we magnify Allah, then we by default become limited back into the space which we are, which is a speck on the spectrum of existence. Our essence is so remarkably contingent and barely jaiz. Yani I don't need to exist. I exist purely by the will of Allah. نحن في قبضته, every moment. التعلق, the relationship that we have مع Allah, نحن في قبضته. So that breath that you just took, you only took it because Allah, you are in His qabda and He allowed you an intake of breath in this moment. So when you realize your iftiqar, when you realize you're barely able to exist, you have barely you have control over your bowel movements. You don't know what the next step is going to look like. You don't know what's beyond that moment. When you realize the vulnerability, going back to Pichincha, right? When you realize
I'm going to Mount Pichincha.
when you realize the vulnerability, then you'll be like everyone else who, when they need saving, they'll say God.
Right.
Because anyone, Muslim or non, believer or non-believer, when things get hot, they're going to say what? God save me.
You're right.
Then that essence, you'll come into, because it's only in those real moments of vulnerability where you come to your raw essence in the fitri sense of Allah.
Right.
That's what dhikr is. It's bringing yourself into that space all the time. So you want to deflate your ego, your overly exaggerated, overly bloated ego, you have to pop it with pins, and those are with sujood. أقرب ما يكون العبد إلى ربه وهو ساجد. So if I am dirt, Allah is telling me, come back to the dirt, bow your head, which is the most honorable part of yourself, on the dirt, and I will lift you, right? And I will bring you to the highest of heights.
Sure.
And I will show you that which you will not have ever seen or fathomed, right? ما لا عين رأت ولا أذن سمعت. The second nasiha that I give, so this is dhikr, dua, daily awrad. People say all the time, I was just talking to a sister about this, dhikr, and yes, they're good, but like they're not sufficient. But what is the actual regiment of my dhikr? What is it a riyada? It is a daily diet of dhikr, of dua, of sujood, of ruku', of Qur'an.
For most it's not.
But that's what it is. Like at the end of the day, we all know a diet and an exercise does not mean once a year or twice a year.
Yes.
It has to mean every year,
Absolutely.
right? We know that.
Yeah.
Now, do we do it? No. We know we shouldn't have donuts, but we eat them.
Yeah.
We know we need to exercise, but we don't. Yeah. So don't come to Allah and say, Ya Allah, your remedy's not working.
I did it for a week, it didn't get me
anywhere.
Work. Yeah.
So to deflate the ego and to remove ourselves from the pathway of the light of Allah, because one thing that I did not say and I wanted to say, but perhaps I'll say it tomorrow, is that a lot of us, we feel that we are in dark places all the time. We feel like our home is dark, our work is dark, even our masajid are dark, our institutions are dark. But we don't realize that, number one, Allahu nuru samawati wal ard. So the light of Allah is manifest. But what is not allowing for the light of Allah to shine in my space is me.
Sure.
Is because I've inflated my ego in such an exaggerated fashion that I just don't see Allah's light. Although it is there, Allahu qareeb, and His light is manifest and ever bright, right? So I need to get myself out of the way. Like, brothers and sisters, get yourselves out of the way of your home's light. Your home needs light. And you are the reason. You have to look at yourself. As a husband, a wife, a child, you are the reason the light of Allah is not shining. If you realize that and you come into real self-realization, then you'll know to bow yourself to get out of the way.
A lot of self-introspection, self-examination.
Absolutely.
Which we're uncomfortable doing, because as soon as I see myself, I don't want that to be the picture of me.
And this leads me to my second nasiha, which is we have to empower loved ones who are going to be open with us. I need to have Mu'tasim in my life, Ustaz Mu'tasim, my Habib, who tells me, Yasir, that was wrong. You shouldn't have done that. You acted in a way that was unbecoming. You were a little bit arrogant. You spoke out of line. You did this. Your dress, your talk, your action, your behavior.
Right.
As someone who loves you. But now what I have to empower Mu'tasim to be able to do that confidently. Because we all know that I have a narrative And if Mu'tasim does not
fit that narrative,
or he does not like cater to that narrative, he's going to be enemy number one to me.
Sure.
I'm going to attack him. Like, who do you think you are?
Right.
Who do you think you're talking to me? Why do you think you're so special? Right? Like, I may be better to Allah, closer to Allah than you are. Okay,
Sure, right.
That's all besides the fact. No, I need Mu'tasim in my life. And that's why Sayyidina Umar, his words are the words that have to define this whole space. رَحِمَ اللَّهُ امْرَأً أَهْدَى إِلَيَّ عُيُوبِي. May Allah have mercy upon the one who gives me as a gift my faults. So I need not just Mu'tasim, but I need Mu'tasim, I need Mustafa, I need all of my brothers and sisters who love me. I need to empower them to say, be my mir'ah. Al-mu'min mir'atu akhi. Here's the mirror. Please, someone hold it up to me. And I want you to expose every fault. Just like when I stand in front of the mirror to see like every blemish and to cover it up, to get my beard, make sure every hair is in place. I need brothers and sisters who are going to be those mirrors to say, hey, it's a little bit off. Right? Even if the person's being a stickler, even if the person you've empowered is a little bit extra, let them.
What a beautiful relationship that is.
It's good.
Right.
And we'll close with this. I know we need to go, but like the companions, they would grab each other by the beard.
Amazing.
Right? They would say, Ya Aba Kada, what's going on?
Can you imagine if I did that to you?
Go ahead, grab me from that. No, please grab me. We need to grab each other's. We need to stop this fragility.
Right.
We need to stop this idea that I cannot handle the fact that resiliency happens only with that struggle. Yes,
Sure.
Abuse is wrong, right? Being vile and disrespectful is wrong. But we need to, that's why I'm saying you empower. If I empower you and you know you're confident to come and tell me, then I know that you can come to me anytime.
Right.
Say that was not okay, right? We hug it out, we scream it out, we yell it out, whatever. We cry it out behind closed doors, and we go out, and we were loving each other inside and loving each other outside, and we're really fi sabilillah.
Barakallah fi Shaykh Yasir. Ego is the enemy. I think we made that clear. Thank you so much for spending this time with us. Inshallah, and I look forward to many years of tugging each other.
Before we close, can I just have an thought on one?
Of course.
The nasiha to the one who's on the opposite side of that. So instead of the one who's accepting the advice from someone, the one to how they handle the rejection when they give the advice.
Yes.
They keep pushing to give the advice. Don't just turn them off.
That's Jazakallah khair, Ustaz Sidi Mustafa, for that. I mean, it's extremely important to understand that the Prophet ﷺ makes it very clear in this profound rhetorical style where he says, Ad-Deenun Nasiha. Ad-Deen and Nasiha. This is Uslubu Hasn wa Qasr in the language of the rhetoricians, which says that if the deen is anything, it is advice. And what is so beautifully liberating, especially for all of us who've been kind of working in the da'wah scene, if you will, whatever that means. I'm not crazy about those words, but let's just move on from that. Is the idea that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala telling the Prophet وَمَا عَلَيْكَ إِلَّا الْبَلَاغُ. Your duty is to relay. إِنَّكَ لَا تَهْدِي مَنْ أَحْبَبْتَ وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ يَهْدِي مَنْ يَشَاءُ. If I understand that my duty as a nasih ameen is just to say to you, Ya akhi, ya habibi, ya ustadi, ya shaykhi, that was not okay. You say, you arrogant, young punk, who do you think you are? That's your response? That's between you and Allah. Right. But that does not impact the fact that وَمَا عَلَيْكَ إِلَّا الْبَلَاغُ.
I'm going to give you this advice.
Allahumma ballaghт, Allahumma fashhad. Were those not the words of the khulafa as they ended? Allahumma ballaghт, Allahumma fashhad. Oh Allah, I have relayed. Oh Allah, bear witness. All of the duty of the prophets was to bear witness. I need to make sure that I did that in my life. That I was a witness to the truth. I tried to convey it and show it to my loved ones. I was nasihun ameen. I was a trustworthy advisor to my friends, my family, my community, my ummah. People rejected me. People saw me as being a nut job. People saw me as being irrelevant. People saw me as being whatever. That's between them and Allah. Right? Now I have to be hakim. I can't just be, people think they can give nasiha in any way. No, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "Ud'u ila sabili rabbika bil hikma wal maw'idha al hasana wajadilhum billati hi ahsan." So we have to be wise. We have to use the most excellent of words, beautiful words, the best words. You know,
you have the best words.
we have to use the best words.
I'm back in America.
Exactly. You need to go back to Turkey. But we need to be wise, and we need to be beautiful, we need to be sincere, we need to do balagh, and we have to be very accepting of the fact that there are times our children are going to reject us, our spouses are going to reject us, our family members are going to reject us, our whole community may reject us, right? And we have to be careful, because today, under the pressure of acceptance, we're compromising on so many of our essential Muhammadan Quranic truths under the false premise of acceptance.
Very scary.
And it is. And this is us derelicting our responsibilities as being nusaha. So our ulama have taught us, when you give fatwa, you speak to the awam, you speak to Allah.
And you know, we're compromising in spaces where other people are operating who are non-Muslim, where they themselves are not compromising in the same way.
Not even a close.
That's
Our
very
masajid,
strange.
our masajid and dress code in masajid.
Yeah.
You know, you go to a church. I remember when I went to church and I went to Catholic school.
Right.
The priest threw the hat off my head.
Yes.
You know, he's like, you have some respect in the church,
Amazing.
right? We have an inferiority and
Yes.
insecurity about our spaces. We just don't want, and where people are asking to respect, and then we proactively encourage them to disrespect.
Absolutely, yes.
So I purposefully went in heavy on the side of, listen, we're not special, we're not important, get over yourself.
Good.
That was basically the theme of my talk. But then there were one or two people who were like, well, how do we think about the question of self-esteem?
Right.
Right? So it's like, and I appreciate it. The subtlety of like, okay, well, and that's why I said up there, I said, listen, I'm not saying we are garbage.
Yes.
We are dirt. Because
Yes.
Allah said, the Prophet said, كُلُّكُم مِّنْ آدَمَ وَآدَمَ مِّن تُرَابٍ.
That's correct. MashaAllah.
We are dirt. But we are not garbage.
Yeah.
Like, we're not nothing. In the sense of like, we are dignified. وَلَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ. This I did not say up there. I didn't like do the offset. This is where people are like, you know, what about my self-esteem?
Sure.
What about my self-worth?
Yes.
I'm also very weary of these like psychotherapy words that are constantly peddled. Like, you know, make sure you self-love, self-worth, self-esteem. You know, I think we have to be very careful about these words, because I think it's like a cloak for ego. There's one thing, like I said, to be confident and to say like ma'allah, like, you know, like when Sayyidina Umar said to when he said to Abu Ubaidah, he said, "Nahnu qawmun a'azzana Allahu bil Islam."
You're right.
You know, we are people that Allah has dignified us with Islam.
Right.
لو ابتغينا فيما غير, if we seek that which was in other than Allah, then Allah لأذلنا Allah. Allah will certainly abase us. That's izzah billah. You know, so if you're talking about self-esteem billah, if you're talking about confidence lillah, then that's a very different orientation. But so point being is that like some of these questions are relevant to just to clarify and to create the requisite
Actually, I was going to hit that with you, by the way,
Really?
but just because of timing, because I know that's how someone's going to come at you and say, well, what is ego and what is my self-worth? Shaykh Yasir, barakallahu feek for being with us. The conversation on ego is the enemy, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala always keep us connected, inshallah, and always tugging at each other's beards. Ya Rabbi.